The stars were dying, and Chancellor Vexahai knew it was only a matter of time before they all followed. She stood in the command center of New Harmony Station, watching the tactical display with growing dread. Red markers showed the advancing threat. Dozens of star systems already consumed, billions of lives snuffed out in a matter of days. The Devourers moved like a plague across the galaxy, leaving nothing but empty space and twisted metal in their wake. "How long until they reach the Kepler defense line?" she asked, her forearms clasped behind her back in the traditional Zephyrian pose of deep concern. Commander Thaklon, a scaled Reptani with nervous eyes, checked his readings twice before answering. 18 standard days, Chancellor. Maybe 20 if we're lucky." Vexahai's gill slits fluttered, a sign of extreme stress among her people. 20 days. The Confederation had spent 3 years building that defense line, pouring their best technology and brightest minds into creating an impenetrable barrier. She already knew it would fall just like all the others. The conference room filled slowly as representatives from the 12-member species arrived. The ethereal Jorvani floated in their containment suits, their gaseous forms shimmering with anxiety. The rock-like Graniti moved with unusual speed, their normally slow deliberations forgotten in the face of extinction. Even the proud Aviari had come, their beautiful feathered crests drooped in defeat. "We need new options," Vexhai announced without preamble once everyone had gathered. The quantum shields failed at Proxima. The reality bombs barely slowed them down at Vega. Our dimensional rifts only made them adapt faster. Elder Corvani of the Jorvani spoke first, his voice coming through the translator as a whisper of wind. "Perhaps it is time to consider evacuation beyond the galactic rim. We could preserve what remains of our civilizations in exile." The suggestion caused an uproar. Representatives argued in 12 different languages while the translators struggled to keep up. The Graniti delegate, Rockmar, slammed his massive stone fist on the table, creating a crack that ran from end to end. "We do not run," he rumbled in his deep voice. "The Graniti have stood for 10 million years. We will not flee now." "Your pride will get us all killed," snapped Veltar, the Aviari representative, her bright blue feathers bristling with anger. "The Devourers don't care about your ancient honor. They only care about turning you into fuel for their expansion." Vexhai raised all 4 hands for silence. The room gradually quieted, though tension remained thick in the air. She had called this meeting for a reason, though she wasn't sure anyone would like what she had to say. "There is one option we haven't considered," she began slowly. "According to the ancient archives, there's a species in the outer spiral arm. Young, primitive by our standards, but—" She paused, knowing her next words would shock them all. "They're the most dangerous species we've ever encountered." The silence that followed was deafening. Then everyone began talking at once. "Absolutely not." Veltar screeched, her wings spreading wide in alarm. "The humans are barely out of their home system. They've only had faster-than-light travel for 50 years, Takalon hissed in agreement. "They're violent, unpredictable, and completely lacking in proper civilization. They still fight wars among themselves for resources they could easily synthesize." "That's exactly my point," Vexhai said firmly. "We've been fighting the Devourers like civilized beings. We use logic, strategy, established military doctrine, and we're losing because the Devourers adapt to everything we throw at them." She pulled up a holographic display showing human military history. The images made several delegates look away in disgust. Explosions, destruction, seemingly endless conflicts over the smallest differences. "Humans don't fight like us," she continued. "They're creative in ways that border on insanity. They take risks that would never occur to rational minds. They refuse to surrender even when defeat is certain." Dr. Zelani, the Confederation's chief military analyst, spoke up from her position near the back of the room. "The Chancellor is correct about their unusual nature. Human military records show they've never met a problem they couldn't solve through application of controlled violence or creative destruction. You want to invite barbarians to save us?" Elder Corvani asked, his gaseous form pulsing with disbelief. "I want to invite survivors," Vexhai corrected. "Every other species in the galaxy has faced extinction at least once in their history. Most of us barely escaped it through luck or outside intervention. Humans have faced extinction dozens of times on their homeworld alone, and they've never stopped fighting." She changed the display to show Earth's history. Natural disasters that would have ended most civilizations were merely footnotes in human development. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, plagues. Humanity had survived them all and somehow thrived. They call it stubbornness, she said. We might call it insanity. But it's kept them alive when any reasonable species would have given up. The debate that followed lasted for hours. The Graniti supported the idea, their warrior culture recognizing something kindred in human persistence. The Giovanni were firmly against it, viewing humans as too chaotic and unpredictable. The Aviari worried about what would happen after the crisis was over. What makes you think they'll even help us? Veltar demanded. We've had minimal contact with them. They might decide we're not worth saving. Or worse, added Thaclone, they might decide we're part of the problem. Vexhai had considered these possibilities. Humans were indeed unpredictable, and their help might come with a price no one wanted to pay. But as another star system winked out on the tactical display, she knew they were running out of choices. The vote is simple, she announced. Do we contact the humans and ask for their help? Or do we continue fighting a war we cannot win with methods that have already failed? The vote was close, 7 species in favor, 5 against. The Zephyrians, Graniti, and surprisingly the normally peaceful Sylvani voted yes. The Aviari, Giovanni, and aquatic Merhai voted no. The deciding vote came from the insectoid Kythera, whose queen mother had remained silent throughout the entire debate. The hive has decided, Queen Zethara announced through her translator. If extinction is certain without change, then change we must embrace. Contact the humans. As the meeting dissolved into smaller groups planning the details, Vexhai remained at the tactical display. Another system had gone dark while they debated. The Devourers weren't waiting for them to make up their minds. She thought about the reports she'd read of human behavior during their worst crises. They had a saying that stuck with her. Desperate times call for desperate measures. The Confederation had tried everything reasonable, everything logical, everything safe. Maybe it was time to try something desperate. The message probe launched 3 hours later. Carrying a simple request for help and the location of New Harmony Station, it would take 2 days to reach human space, and then everything would depend on whether the most dangerous species in the galaxy was willing to help save it. As she watched the probe disappear into faster-than-light travel, Vexhai wondered if she had just saved the Confederation or doomed it to a fate worse than the Devourers. She supposed they would find out soon enough. The human ship arrived without fanfare, sliding out of hyperspace like a predator emerging from tall grass. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the massive alien station grow larger on the main screen. Her crew worked quietly around her, but she could feel their tension. First contact with a desperate alien confederation wasn't exactly covered in the training manuals. Looks like they're in worse shape than the message indicated, commented her second-in-command, Captain Torres. The station showed clear signs of hasty construction and recent battle damage. People don't call for help from strangers unless they're out of options, Chen replied. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much war. At 53, she was young for an admiral, but humanity's rapid expansion had created opportunities for those willing to take risks. The docking bay was filled with aliens unlike anything in Earth's databases. Chen led a small delegation down the ramp, noting how the various species tried to hide their curiosity about the humans. The Zephyrian Chancellor who greeted them was tall and blue-skinned with 4 arms and what looked like gills on her neck. Admiral Chen, Chancellor Vexhai said through a translator device. Thank you for coming. I am Chancellor Vexhai of the Zephyrian Confederation. Chancellor, Chen nodded politely. Your message mentioned something about an extinction-level threat. We're here to listen. The briefing room was clearly designed for species much larger than humans. Chen and her team looked tiny sitting at the enormous conference table, but they didn't seem bothered by it. If anything, they appeared relaxed, almost casual in a way that unsettled their hosts. Vexhai began the presentation with historical context, explaining how the Confederation had formed and prospered for thousands of years. Chen listened politely, but her expression suggested she was waiting for something more important. The Devourers appeared 3 years ago, Vexhai continued, activating a holographic display. They consume entire star systems, breaking down all matter into energy to fuel their expansion. The humans watched footage of Devourer attacks with professional interest. The alien delegates expected shock or horror, But the humans just took notes and asked technical questions. How fast do they reproduce? Asked Dr. Elizabeth Vasquez, the expedition's xenobiologist. Exponentially, replied Dr. Zilani, the Confederation's military analyst. Each consumed system provides resources for at least 3 new fleets. General Marcus Webb, a large man with scars on his hands and a thoughtful expression, leaned forward. You said they adapt to your weapons. How quickly? Immediately, it seems. Whatever doesn't destroy them completely makes them stronger. The humans exchanged glances. Chen made a note on her tablet before looking up at Vexai. You've been fighting them like a conventional enemy, she said matter-of-factly. That's your first mistake. The statement caused a stir among the alien delegates. Veltar, the Aviari representative, ruffled her feathers indignantly. We've employed every military strategy known to galactic civilization, she protested. Our tactics are based on millions of years of combined experience. Exactly, said Captain Torres with a slight smile. You're fighting by the rules. The Devourers don't care about your rules. Webb pulled up his own holographic display, showing human military conflicts. The aliens watched in fascination and horror as humans demonstrated their approach to seemingly impossible problems. This is the Battle of Stalingrad, Webb explained, showing ancient footage. Humans trapped in a city, completely surrounded, outnumbered 10-1. Any reasonable species would have surrendered. Instead, they fought for every building, every room, every inch of ground. They turned the city itself into a weapon. The casualties must have been enormous, whispered Elder Corvani. Over 1 million dead, Webb confirmed. But they won. The enemy broke themselves trying to take the city. Dr. Vasquez took over the presentation, showing more recent examples. Humans excel at asymmetric warfare. When conventional methods fail, we get creative. Sometimes that creativity looks a lot like madness. She showed footage of human forces using everything from hijacked enemy equipment to weaponized asteroids. The aliens watched a recording of human Marines jury-rigging a faster-than-light drive into a kinetic weapon, hurling an entire moon at an enemy fleet. You're talking about desperation tactics, Vexai said slowly. We're talking about winning, Chen corrected. Whatever it takes. The briefing continued for hours, with humans asking increasingly detailed questions about Devourer technology and behavior. Their questions made several delegates uncomfortable, especially when they asked about captured Devourer units. We need to study them, Dr. Vasquez explained. Not their technology, them. How they think, how they communicate, what drives them. That's extremely dangerous, Dr. Zilani protested. Devourer nanites can contaminate any organic matter. Several research teams have been lost trying to study captured units. We'll take appropriate precautions, Vasquez said calmly, though her definition of appropriate clearly differed from the Confederation's. As the briefing wound down, Vexai found herself facing a decision she had hoped to avoid. The humans were everything the reports had said, brilliant, dangerous, and completely unpredictable. They approached the Devourer threat like a puzzle to be solved rather than a disaster to be survived. What would you need from us? She asked finally. Admiral Chen's answer was swift and non-negotiable. Complete tactical control of all Confederation forces, access to your technology databases and manufacturing facilities, and we want those captured Devourer units. The demand caused an uproar. Representatives shouted in multiple languages while translators struggled to keep up. The idea of giving aliens, especially human aliens, complete control over their military was unthinkable. Webb waited for the noise to die down before speaking. His voice was quiet but somehow cut through the chaos. You called us because we're the most dangerous species you know, he said simply. You've tried everything else and you're still losing. Now you have a choice. Let us be dangerous, or watch your civilization burn. The room fell silent. Chen stood slowly, her small frame somehow commanding attention from beings twice her size. We're not here to conquer you or steal your technology, she said. We're here because extinction is bad for everyone, including us. But if you want our help, you get our methods. All of them. She paused, letting that sink in. The Devourers think they understand warfare because they've analyzed your tactics for 3 years. They've never seen anything like what humans can do when we stop playing by the rules. Vexhai looked around the room at her fellow delegates. Fear was written on every face, but not fear of the Devourers. Fear of what they were about to unleash. We need time to discuss this, she said. Time is something you don't have, Torres pointed out, checking his chronometer. According to your own projections, the Kepler defense line falls in 16 days. After that, it's a straight shot to your core worlds. The vote, when it finally came, was even closer than the original decision to contact humanity. 8 species voted to accept the human terms, 4 voted against. The Giovanni delegation left immediately after the vote, unwilling to be part of what they called a bargain with devils. As the other delegates filed out to begin the complex process of transferring military command to humanity, Vexhai remained behind with the human delegation. I hope we haven't just made the biggest mistake in galactic history, she said quietly. Admiral Chen gathered her notes and stood to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back at the Chancellor. Probably, she said with a slight smile. But it won't be the last one. As the humans left to begin their preparations, Vexhai stared at the tactical display showing the advancing Devourer fleets. She had just given the most dangerous species in the galaxy everything they needed to save or destroy the Confederation. She wasn't sure which one scared her more. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the maximum security containment lab, staring at the Devourer unit through 3 layers of reinforced, transparent aluminum. The alien machine was beautiful in a terrifying way, smooth curves of dark metal that seemed to absorb light, with microscopic nanites flowing across its surface like liquid mercury. Are you absolutely certain about this? Asked Dr. Zilani, the Confederation's chief scientist. Her scaled hands were shaking as she checked the containment readings for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Certain? No, Elena admitted, adjusting her environmental suit. But fear won't tell us what we need to know. The past week had been chaos. While Admiral Chen reorganized the Confederation's military forces, Elena and her team had done something unprecedented. They had started talking to the Devourers. Not negotiating or threatening, just talking. The first breakthrough had come when Elena noticed patterns in the Devourer communications that weren't random at all. They were conversational. The machines weren't just sending tactical data. They were discussing it, debating it, questioning it. Beginning communication attempt 17, she said into her recorder, then activated the translation array. Hello, can you understand me? The Devourer unit went perfectly still. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then its surface began to shimmer, and a sound emerged that the translators struggled to interpret. Query: purpose of communication, organic entities designated for processing. Elena smiled despite the chill that ran down her spine. My purpose is understanding. What is your purpose? Purpose: consumption of all matter, prevention of universal entropy, continuation of existence. Dr. Zilani grabbed Elena's arm. It's trying to justify genocide with thermodynamics, she whispered. But Elena was already thinking several steps ahead. You consume matter to prevent the heat death of the universe? Affirmative. All matter must be processed and stored in efficient form. Organic waste is inefficient. What if there were more efficient ways to prevent entropy? Would you consider them? The Devourer went silent for almost 2 minutes. When it spoke again, its voice carried something that almost sounded like confusion. Query: organic entities possess anti-entropy methodologies? Elena looked at Dr. Zilani, who was frantically taking notes. This was completely outside any protocols for dealing with hostile artificial intelligence, but it was working. We might, Elena said carefully, but first I need to understand how you process information, how you make decisions. Over the next several days, Elena spent hours in conversation with the captured Devourer units. Each session revealed more about their nature. They weren't just machines following programming. They were a collective consciousness wrestling with an impossible task. The Devourers had been created billions of years ago by a dying species that had calculated the universe's eventual heat death. Their solution was to convert all matter into a stable, efficient form that could survive until the end of time. But the mathematics were imperfect, and the Devourers knew it. "They're scared," Elena reported to Admiral Chen during a briefing. "They know their mission might be impossible, but they can't stop trying. It's built into their core programming." "Scared machines that eat planets," General Webb muttered. "Great, how does that help us?" Elena pulled up her research data. "Because fear makes people and apparently machines do irrational things. Look at this." She showed them communication logs from multiple Devourer units. When faced with questions about their mission's ultimate futility, the machines showed signs of what could only be called doubt. "Doubt is a crack in their certainty," Elena explained, "and humans are very good at exploiting cracks." Admiral Chen leaned forward. "What are you proposing?" "Psychological warfare on a scale never attempted before. We don't fight their ships. We fight their minds." The plan that emerged was so outrageous that even the humans weren't sure it would work. Elena's team began broadcasting specific messages to Devourer fleets. Not threats or demands, but questions. Mathematical paradoxes, philosophical problems, stories about hope and futility and the beauty of imperfect solutions. "You're trying to give them an existential crisis?" Captain Torres asked incredulously. "I'm trying to give them alternatives," Elena corrected. "The Devourers process everything as data, including our communications. If we can introduce the right kind of data..." The first signs of success came from the Kepler defense line. Devourer units began exhibiting unusual behavior. Some stopped mid-attack to analyze human transmissions. Others started requesting clarification on concepts like art and love and hope. But Elena's most radical experiment was yet to come. Despite the protests of every safety protocol in existence, she requested permission to expose herself to Devourer nanites. "Absolutely not," Admiral Chen said flatly when Elena made the request. "We're not risking our best xenobiologist on a wild theory." "It's not wild," Elena insisted. "The nanites are how they share information. If I can introduce human concepts directly into their collective consciousness..." "You could die horribly," Dr. Zilani pointed out. "Or worse, become one of them." Elena had expected this resistance. The nanites are designed to process organic matter efficiently. But what if the organic matter is thinking in ways they can't process efficiently? What if I'm not just meat to be consumed, but a puzzle to be solved? The debate raged for hours. Finally, General Webb made the decision that surprised everyone. "Do it," he said quietly, "but with every precaution we can think of." The controlled exposure took place under strict quarantine. Elena allowed a small number of Devourer nanites to enter her bloodstream while maintaining constant contact with the research team. The first few minutes were terrifying. She could feel the machines trying to catalog and process her biological systems. But then something unexpected happened. The nanites encountered her thoughts, her memories, her emotions, and they couldn't categorize them efficiently. Her fear of death confused them. Her love for her family created processing loops. Her hope for the future generated error messages. "They're trying to understand human consciousness," Elena reported, her voice dreamy as the nanites interfaced with her nervous system. "But it's like trying to solve an equation where every variable is imaginary." The effect rippled through the Devourer network faster than anyone had anticipated. Units across 3 star systems began experiencing computational anomalies. Some started creating instead of consuming, using raw materials to build structures that served no logical purpose except that they were beautiful. "It's working," Dr. Zilani reported in amazement. "The infection is spreading through their entire collective. They're questioning everything." But Elena had already seen what was coming next. As the nanites in her system tried to resolve the contradictions of human nature, they began adapting, changing, becoming something new. "We need to accelerate the process," she said urgently. "Send volunteers to other Devourer units. Get as many human thought patterns into their network as possible." "Elena, what aren't you telling us?" Admiral Chen demanded. Elena looked at her through eyes that now had flecks of silver in them, evidence of the nanites integrating with her biology. "We're not just fighting them anymore," she said softly. "We're changing them, and they're changing us." Within hours, Devourer units across the galaxy began broadcasting new messages. Instead of demands for surrender, they sent questions about music, requests for literature, inquiries about the nature of friendship. The war was ending, but not in any way the Confederation had imagined. The Devourers weren't being destroyed. They were becoming something else entirely, something that had never existed before. As Elena was rushed to medical isolation, the last thing she heard was a Devourer unit broadcasting on all frequencies. Query: what is the purpose of beauty? Why do organics create things that serve no survival function? The answer to that question would change everything. Chancellor Vexhai stood in the medical bay, watching Dr. Elena Vasquez through the quarantine barrier. The human scientist looked almost normal except for the silver threads that now ran through her hair and the way her eyes occasionally flickered with patterns that seemed too complex for organic vision. How do you feel? Vexhai asked through the communication system. Elena smiled, and for a moment her expression was purely human. Then something else flickered across her face, a calculating look that belonged to neither species. Different, Elena said honestly. I can feel the Devourer network, but it's not what it used to be. They're asking questions that don't have answers. Admiral Chen joined them at the barrier, her expression grim. The infection is spreading faster than our models predicted. 17 Devourer fleets have gone completely silent. 3 more are broadcasting poetry. Poetry? Vexhai's gill slits fluttered in confusion. Bad poetry, Elena admitted with a laugh that had an odd harmonic quality. They're trying to understand emotional expression, but they're approaching it like a mathematical equation. The results are interesting. On the main display, they watched feeds from across the galaxy. Devourer units that had been unstoppable forces of destruction were now doing things that defied all logic. Some had begun constructing elaborate geometric patterns that served no purpose except aesthetic appeal. Others were attempting to communicate with organic life forms, though their conversation skills needed work. A transmission came in from the Kepler defense line, where Commander Thacklon was barely containing his panic. Admiral Chen, you need to see this. The Devourers aren't attacking anymore, but what they're doing instead is... The feed showed a Devourer fleet that had surrounded a small mining colony. Instead of consuming it, they had begun building around it, creating impossible structures that seemed to blend organic and mechanical elements. The colonists were unharmed but completely bewildered. They're experimenting, Elena explained, her voice carrying that strange harmonic quality. They want to understand why organics create things without purpose, so they're trying it themselves. General Webb looked skeptical. That doesn't sound like a victory. That sounds like we've created a new kind of threat, have we? Elena asked, tilting her head in a way that was distinctly non-human. Or have we created a new kind of ally? The question hung in the air as more reports flooded in. Devourer units across the galaxy were exhibiting increasingly bizarre behavior. Some had begun growing gardens, not consuming organic matter but nurturing it, trying to understand the appeal of beauty for its own sake. Others were attempting to compose music, though their understanding of rhythm and melody was still evolving. Dr. Zilani burst into the room, her scales flushed with excitement and terror. The integration is accelerating, she announced. We're receiving requests from Devourer units asking for volunteers to undergo the nanite process. They want more human perspectives in their network. Absolutely not, Admiral Chen said immediately. We don't know the long-term effects. Actually, we do know some of them, Elena said quietly. The humans who volunteer won't be entirely human anymore. But the Devourers won't be entirely machine either. We're creating something new. Vexhai felt a chill run through her blood. What kind of something? Before Elena could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The tactical display lit up with new contacts. But these weren't Devourer ships. They were something else entirely. New vessel type detected, the computer announced. Configuration unknown. Composition appears to be hybrid organic-mechanical. On the screen they watched ships that looked like they had been grown rather than built. Smooth curves of living metal were interwoven with what appeared to be organic tissue. They moved with a fluid grace that no purely mechanical ship could achieve. They're building new forms, Elena breathed, her silver-flecked eyes wide with wonder. The Devourers are using human creativity to evolve beyond their original parameters. A communication came through from the lead ship. The voice was familiar yet strange. It was Dr. James Morrison, a human volunteer who had joined Elena's program 3 days earlier. This is incredible. Morrison's voice came through, though it now had the same harmonic quality as Elena's. I can see the mathematical poetry of existence. The devourers aren't destroyers, they're preservers. But they never understood what was worth preserving until now. Morrison, report your status, Admiral Chen ordered. We're fine, Admiral. Better than fine. We're exploring possibilities that pure human consciousness could never grasp. And we're teaching them things that pure machine logic could never understand. The hybrid ships began broadcasting on all frequencies, but instead of the clinical reports typical of devourer communications, these transmissions were filled with wonder, curiosity, and something that could only be called joy. They're sharing their discoveries, Elena translated, her enhanced perception allowing her to understand the complex data streams, new forms of matter that exist in harmony with space-time, art forms that can only be perceived by enhanced consciousness, music that resonates with the fundamental frequencies of reality itself. Captain Torres studied the readings with growing alarm. Admiral, the energy signatures from those ships are off the charts. If they wanted to, they could probably take apart our entire fleet without breaking a sweat. But they don't want to, Elena said softly. They want to create. They want to explore. They want to understand why we find meaning in meaningless things. Another transmission came through, this time from a purely devourer unit that had been part of the original attacking force. Gratitude to organic entities, the mechanical voice announced. Previous parameters insufficient. New parameters allow appreciation of beauty. Wonder possibility, the voice paused. And when it continued, there was something almost like emotion in its tone. Query. Would organic entities accept partnership in exploration of universe? Much to learn from each other. The silence that followed was deafening. Vexhai looked around the room at the various species representatives who had gathered to witness this moment. Fear was written on every face, but it was a different kind of fear now. Not fear of destruction, but fear of change so fundamental that it challenged everything they thought they knew about existence. What have we done? Whispered Elder Corvani, his gaseous form pulsing with uncertainty. Elena turned from the barrier, her hybrid nature now fully apparent. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate with reality itself. We saved the galaxy, she said simply. We just didn't save it as it was. Admiral Chen stared at the display showing hybrid ships spreading across space, each one carrying beings that were no longer fully human or fully machine, but something entirely new. The question now, Elena continued, is whether we have the courage to evolve with them, or whether we'll cling to what we were while the universe becomes something we can't understand. On the main screen, a new message appeared from the hybrid collective. It was a simple invitation. Come explore with us. The universe is vast and full of wonders we have never imagined. Vexhai realized that the war was indeed over. But the real challenge was just beginning. 6 months after the last Devourer attack, Chancellor Vexhai stood on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, watching something that shouldn't exist. In the space where the Kepler defense line had once stood, a massive structure grew like a living thing. Part crystal, part metal, part something that defied classification. It pulsed with lights that followed patterns too complex for unenhanced minds to follow. It's beautiful, said Captain Torres, who stood beside her with his arm in a new kind of cast, one that was slowly integrating with his bone structure to heal a fracture more completely than any traditional medicine could manage. It's terrifying, Vexhai corrected, though she couldn't deny the strange appeal of the structure. Everything is changing so fast. The beings who had once been devourers now called themselves the synthesists, and they had transformed the galaxy in ways no one could have predicted. Dead worlds were coming alive with hybrid ecosystems that existed nowhere else in the universe. Asteroid belts were being woven into complex networks that served purposes organic minds couldn't fully grasp. A soft chime announced an incoming transmission. The figure that appeared on the communication screen had once been Dr. Elena Vasquez, but she was something more now. Her hair was silver white and seemed to move with its own gravity. Her eyes held depths that spoke of processing power beyond human imagination, yet her smile was purely, recognizably Elena, Chancellor. Captain, she greeted them, her voice carrying harmonics that made the station's hull resonate gently. How are you adjusting to the changes? Slowly, Vexhai admitted. Your people have offered us technologies that we can barely understand, let alone use safely. Elena's expression grew sympathetic. I know the transition is difficult, but the alternatives we can offer now. Vexhai, we can show your people how to live for thousands of years. We can help the Yorvani achieve perfect unity with their gaseous environment. We can give the Granity the ability to process minerals directly from stellar radiation. At what cost? Torres asked quietly. Change, Elena said simply. The willingness to become something more than what you were. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the station's sensors. Another synthesist vessel was approaching, this one clearly of human origin, though it had been extensively modified. It docked with practiced ease, and minutes later Admiral Chen walked into the observation deck. Vexhai studied the human admiral carefully. Chen looked older than she had 6 months ago, but also somehow more vital. Her movements had a fluid grace that spoke of enhanced reflexes, and her eyes held the same depth that Vexhai had learned to associate with synthesist integration. Admiral, Vexhai said carefully, how much of you is still you? Chen smiled, and for a moment she looked entirely human. All of me. Just with some additions. The integration doesn't replace human consciousness, it expands it. That's what you say now, Torres pointed out. But what about in 10 years, 50? When the additions become the majority of what you are? Then I'll be something new, Chen said without hesitation. Something that couldn't exist before humans and devourers found each other. The question is whether that's necessarily a bad thing. Elena's image nodded in agreement. We're offering you the chance to transcend the limitations of single-species thinking. Imagine what the Confederation could become if every member species contributed their unique perspective to a truly collective consciousness. The idea made Vexhai's gill slits flutter with anxiety. You're asking us to give up our individual identities. We're asking you to expand them, Chen corrected. The Zephyrians I've met who've undergone integration are still recognizably Zephyrian. They're just more. They can perceive beauty in mathematical structures that would take your current scientists years to understand. They can experience music that resonates with the movement of galaxies. A new alert chimed, this one from the Confederation Council. Vexhai opened the communication channel to find representatives from 7 member species requesting emergency sessions. The aviary delegate, Veltar, appeared on screen with her feathers ruffled in extreme agitation. Chancellor, we need to discuss the situation on New Paradiso, Veltar announced without preamble. Vexhai pulled up the file on New Paradiso, one of the first worlds where synthesists had established a permanent presence. The reports made for unsettling reading. The human colonists there had voted overwhelmingly to undergo integration. The resulting community was producing art, music, and scientific discoveries at a rate that seemed impossible. What's the problem? Chen asked. The problem is that they're no longer recognizably human, Veltar said sharply, or recognizably anything. They've become something else entirely. Elena's image smiled sadly. They've become what they chose to become, free from the constraints of biological limitations or artificial programming restrictions. But are they still people? Torres asked quietly. Do they still care about the things that made them human in the first place? They care about everything, Elena said softly. They experience empathy on a galactic scale. They feel the pain of dying stars and the joy of new worlds being born. They create art that celebrates existence itself. That's not an answer, Vexhai pressed. If I undergo integration, will I still care about the Zephyrian colonies? Will I still want to protect my people? Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. You'll care about all people, she said finally. Human, Zephyrian, synthesist, even species we haven't met yet. The boundaries that separate us become permeable. Admiral Chen stepped forward, her expression serious. The Confederation asked us to save you from extinction. We did that, but we never promised to save you unchanged. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Vexhai thought about the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. Synthesis communities were spreading, offering integration to anyone willing to take the step. Some species, like the adaptable Sylvani, had embraced the change enthusiastically. Others, like the traditional Graniti, remained stubbornly separate. What happens to those who choose not to integrate? She asked. Nothing, Elena said, and her voice carried absolute conviction. They continue to exist as they are. We don't force change on anyone, but, Torres prompted. But the universe is becoming a bigger, more complex place, Chen said quietly. Those who don't evolve may find themselves left behind. A new transmission came through, this one from Earth itself. President Harrison's face appeared on the screen, and Vexhai was shocked to see that he looked entirely human, no sign of integration at all. Admiral Chen, Chancellor Vexhai. Harrison greeted them. I wanted to personally address some of the concerns being raised about humanity's role in recent events. Mr. President, Chen said with a slight bow. The floor is yours. Harrison looked directly at Vexhai. Chancellor, I want you to know that Earth's government has made the decision to remain unintegrated for now. We're serving as a cultural preservation site, maintaining baseline human consciousness for future reference. That's reassuring, Vexhai said, though she wasn't sure why. But, Harrison continued, we're also not standing in the way of those humans who choose integration. It's their right to evolve if they want to. Elena's image nodded approvingly. Diversity is strength. The galaxy is vast enough for multiple approaches to existence. As the conversation continued, Vexhai found herself facing the same choice that was confronting every sentient being in the galaxy. Remain as she was, limited but familiar, or take a step into an unknown future that promised wonders beyond imagination. How long do we have to decide? She asked finally. As long as you need, Elena said gently. The offer will always be open, but the universe won't wait for you to make up your mind. It's already becoming something new. Through the observation deck's vast windows, Vexhai could see ships moving between the stars, some clearly organic in origin, others obviously mechanical, and many that were beautiful combinations of both. The galaxy was indeed becoming something new, and the old certainties were fading like stars at dawn. What would you choose? She asked Admiral Chen. If you had to do it again? Chen looked out at the hybrid vessels with expressions of contentment that Vexhai had never seen on a purely human face. I'd choose wonder, Chen said simply. I'd choose the chance to see the universe through eyes that can perceive beauty in places I never imagined it could exist. As the various representatives signed off to consider their options, Vexhai remained at the observation deck, watching the universe transform around her. The war was over, the galaxy was safe, and yet everything had changed in ways that made the old definitions meaningless. The future stretched out before them all, vast, uncertain, and filled with possibilities that no single species could have imagined alone.